Hello, this is Henry Fogel. I'm here again with Ralph Creviso, and this is the second of our videos. You have by now also seen videos from the faculty, I hope. We're going to talk in this video a little bit about challenges to performing arts institutions. And this is an overview that is going to help guide you through a lot of the discussions in these two courses. Both 450 and 455, you will find, I think, a lot of overlap between the two. And we have structured it that way because you cannot separate the mission and the artistic part of the organization from the organizational behavior and structure part of the organization. We're not going to talk specifically about coronavirus. We are going to talk a little bit about how an organization is set up to deal with a crisis like that. Ralph, I'm going to just start by saying that in the more than 50 years that I've been in this business, I think the biggest change that I've seen is the growing importance of an arts organization's relevance to its entire community. And that has really changed the way virtually all arts administrators think. And I know you've seen the same thing.
I think that's right. If you want to think about the challenges, I think, Henry, speaking first externally from the organization, the community, is one set of challenges. And then thinking internally to the within the organization, it presents a different set of challenges. I think that the external aspect of this has become more important. I think you're right in terms of the trending over time. It's no longer a successful strategy to be thinking only of the organization, what it produces, and how it produces it. Because of the trending of the shifting of revenue that comes less from ticket sales and more from contributed revenue, an organization has to maintain its relevancy to the community to generate an interest that will result in successful fundraising.
Right, and this is true for symphony orchestras, for opera companies, for dance companies, and for theatrical organizations. I had been saying for some years in the orchestra world, it's no longer enough for an orchestra to mean something to the people who regularly attend its concerts. It actually has to mean something to a broader sector of the community, including even some people who never will buy tickets or who can't buy tickets. Maybe they can't afford the tickets, or maybe they're not comfortable with the art form. If we're all going to claim to be serious community resources, we have to serve the entire community.
And Henry, I've heard you speak about performing arts organization have a perception in the community of being elite or elitism, that performing arts is only for a segment of the population. And that kind of a reputation in the community will not generate enough support from the broader sense of the community in terms of its ability to generate interest, not in terms of ticket selling, but more in terms of creating a broader sense of support from not only contributors, but the community itself. Is the organization playing a role in education? Is it playing a role in community activities? Does the whole community, the whole broad cross-section of the community, see the organization as serving a purpose that they see relevant for them? And I think it's very important that performing arts organizations move away from this elitist view and to make themselves relevant.
Absolutely. And it's funny, you're right, Ralph, that there are internal and external issues, but they're deeply intertwined.
Yes.
How your internal organization works will completely affect how you relate to the community. Um, does your board understand the community? Is your board reflective of the community? Um, is the institution aligned? And alignment does not mean that everybody thinks the same way, but it does mean that everybody agrees on the mission of the organization and maybe have different views on how to achieve that mission, which allows for a healthy discussion.
I think you said something there, Henry, that I want to make sure we don't lose the thread. And that is, performing arts organizations are governed by their boards to ensure both the internal workings of the organization through proper governance by the board, and to ensure the board is a reflection of the diversity of the community are both very important. And we hear today more and more the importance of diversity with recent events, not only in terms of the pandemic, but with regard to the whole movement that has seen so many protests across the country and across the world. What the communities are saying is, you have to mean something to us. And the boards of performing arts organizations have to speak to the cross-section of the community in terms of their diversity, who is represented on the board, and does the board properly reflect the diversity of its community? And I think in today's environment, that's become even more critical.
And I think even beyond who's on the board, what connections has the organization made with community leaders? Maybe they don't all want to be on the board. Maybe you can't have them all on the board and make it too big. But are you talking to and listening to a broad sector of people who lead community organizations and trying to find out how your organization can relate? One of the things that I am proud of that I did in the early 1990s, and it actually had an effect nationally, was I stopped using, at the Chicago Symphony, I stopped using the word outreach, which, if you think about it, is a one-directional word, and it kind of implies the big, wonderful we will reach out and we'll give you something. And that's absolutely the worst possible attitude. It's condescending and patronizing. We changed it to the term community engagement, which has become now pretty much the standard. And what that means is you think differently. You don't think, what can we do that we can give to the community? You actually think, who should we talk to and go and find out what they might want from our organization? What kinds of programs, what might we do? It's, by the way, much harder. You have to listen to ideas that you never would have thought of and might be much more difficult to carry out. But if you're going to mean something to the community, you need to listen to the community as to what they think they want.
I think as each of you experience the courses through the program, this is a thread that I think you have to constantly come back to. So when you're talking about finances, you're talking about marketing, you're talking about development, fundraising, it has to all be connected. The financing, you have to source that revenue from somewhere, and ticket buying is becoming less of a source of revenue as an entity within the whole revenue stream. In your course that has to do with community engagement, which you'll receive in June, Afa Dworkin, who leads the Sphinx organization, I can think of no one better than she who can explain an organization that has created that connection and promoted it not only from the base in Detroit, but across the country. So keep that in mind as we move through, as you move through the program and as we move through the courses over the next month. Henry, let's talk a little bit about, you said something about the internal organization and how alignment is important. I think we should talk a little bit about how the organization functions effectively, and then how does it equip itself in order to deal with challenges using the coronavirus, not as a solution to a problem, but as an approach to a process.
Absolutely. I think, first of all, it's absolutely okay, and I did it many times as a leader, to admit that you don't know the answers. That's actually empowering to you and to the people around you. And I can tell you that anybody in the arts world, or frankly, in any other world today, who says they know the answers to the problems raised by this pandemic is lying. Nobody does. And again, as I think we said in an earlier video, we're not going to tell you how to solve this one because we don't know. But setting up communication lines in an organization, number one, across constituencies, so that let's say in the management staff, the marketing, the fundraising, the finance departments, the operations, and the artistic departments are all talking to each other. The worst kind, to me, the worst kind of organization is one that is siloed, where every individual department talks only to itself. And one of the things you will hear not only Ralph and me, but I think the other faculty members constantly talk about is the need to create open channels of communication. That takes work. Ralph, one of the things I learned early on was that there's a natural instinct for people to build a little wall around themselves. It's safer. And they're only talking to people who think the same way they do. Opening those communication lines, A, on the staff, B, with artists. If you're an orchestra, with your musicians and your music director. If you're a theater company, if you have a resident acting troupe, fine. If you don't, there must be actors you work with on a regular basis and engage on a regular basis that you should be talking to. And then the board, and getting the board to feel comfortable, even having open communication where person A disagrees with person B and it's not an attack. Setting that kind of climate, I think, is central to coming to grips with serious problems.
As we go through the next month and we have the 450 and 455 working together each week, each module, we'll be giving you examples of the things that Henry and I are talking about that are real life examples, and some of them come out of our actual experiences in consulting or running performing arts organizations. I think that one final point, Henry, that I'll make and ask you to comment on is, as an organization approaches challenges, what they find is the usual ways of approaching and solving the problem don't work. And so they need to create a new way of approaching the challenge and solving it. And that takes a different kind of an organization, a different way of thinking.
Yes, and it's the cliche, which I've heard so often that I hate it, but it is true, is thinking out of the box. Although I've come to say that people who use that cliche are not thinking out of the box. There must be a better way to say it. But indeed, particularly in these times, the old ways aren't going to work. Certainly in the orchestra world, for example, in the 50 some odd years that I've been in it, earned income has gone from making up more than half of the budget to now making up at best a third of the budget. That's a huge shift. And that shift has an impact on how the organization does business.
I think, Henry, if we kind of wrap it up here, what we're going to ask you to do for the rest of the week is to concentrate on an orientation to the program, the courses, one another, When we get together for the Zoom sessions on the weekend, we'll reflect back a little bit on what we've said here, how it applies in a broader context, and what you've learned about one another.
Right.
And that's what we'll do in the Zooms. So we look forward to seeing you. Henry, thank you.
Thank you, Ralph.